also let me stay and use his guest bedroom, so I'm really grateful. And it's become a tradition. We started this 10 years ago, these gatherings and events, and we believe that they are better than any kind of normal hotel show where the conditions are what they are, and it's difficult to talk to somebody and to make networking and change music as you please, etc. And also to have fantastic food. I came from Poland to show the Poseidon. It's an official worldwide premiere. So we didn't choose Munich show or Expo show. We chose DAC show. As it usually happens with premieres, it was a very tough deadline, and the chassis, the housing, came the day I was already in the air above Atlantic, and we couldn't dress the DAC, so we made a temporary box that brought the internal part to your ears, but so it sounds the way it should sound and it works the way it should work, but it doesn't look the way it should look. It will look very, very nice. We are using a new company to design and manufacture from CNC slabs of aluminum our housings, as we started with our top-of-the-line Posseidon DAC. That is very different than our historically produced DACs. We've been in the business of making DACs already 14 years, and in the beginning we were making new models like at the speed that the rabbits give birth. It was just one idea, going to sleep, and in the morning I would quickly make new designs or new ideas put on paper and then put on electronic circuit. Today we are much more mature and we have to be careful. We don't want to upset the existing customer base, and we have the whole portfolio, we have the stratification of price levels, and we have to work within these limitations. But even having some best-selling products like our Golden Gate DAC and our Big 7 DAC and our Pacific DAC, the long-term classics, we decided there is time to replace them with something much more, in our mind, modern, meaning easier to manufacture repeatedly, properly, and giving more features, more functions, more user-friendly features that people always ask, and usually they had to specify it while ordering. Now we want to give all to everybody who orders. So we designed not an extension of a Pacific 3, 4, or 5. We designed something like a list of what we wish we had. We had easy to roll tubes, easy to see big display, easy to pack in the shipping container, easy to service, easy to replace boards, and with good muting circuits and DSD and what have you. So we designed it completely from scratch, and it will become the center of our portfolio. And of course there is a flagship always in a very stratospheric price, and there is the entry-level product that is always needed to satisfy people who are only starting with this, or maybe they are not operating in the budget that is needed. But the center of our offering is this, and for me it's a groundbreaking product, but it doesn't look, because it's all inside what is new. Having said that, it's very versatile and it's a very safe bet, because it will not go into any direction that is out of ordinary, but it will not do anything nasty as well. So sometimes you need, if you use very specialized tubes like single-ended triodes, like a 75-year-old NOS, telephone triodes, etc., you may have some kind of problems associated with them, be it microphonics or humming or lack of availability or overheating or some noises, whatever. People are still happy with these difficulties when they are really fascinated with the tube technology, and like many people in Japan, for example, they have a cult on these tubes. But we wanted to create something more kind of modern and without these very, very specialized problems associated with tubes. So this is a DAC that could satisfy somebody who just loves solid state and doesn't care about tubes, just want to have a good sound, or somebody who loves tubes as well. And also you can roll, you have input tubes, interstage tubes, output tubes, power supply tubes. Each of them can be rolled and exchanged with similar or different tubes, especially old ones. And we have guidelines, we have a list of tubes that you can use, and the list goes into hundreds of brand and type permutations. And they are easy to buy, and none of them is costing more than $100, usually less. So we wanted to keep it sane because people can spend a lot of money and make collections of tubes, and we are not a company that encourages collections of tubes. We're about listening to the music. So this DAC, it works with solid state amps, works with balanced amps, works with single-ended amps, tube amps. It can do without preamp, and it's our first DAC that can truly do without preamp, because it has a fully functional preamp built in, and it can be also accessed as an analog input. So even without talking about digital part of the DAC, the preamp itself is the best we ever made, and it's I think it will make it extremely difficult to beat it with external preamp, whether it's Kondo or Paravicini or I don't know, any exotic name you can come up with. It can be only a matter of taste, but it will not beat this preamp. So the preamp is the first thing that we are proud of. Then with the preamp, we have the digital section that can become together. It's a DAC, and a very good one. There is an engine called 11P. So by the engine, I mean the whole electronic circuitry with all inputs, outputs, routing, multiplexing, clocking and reclocking and conversion and outputs and power supplies. Everything we call the engine. It's called engine 11/P for Poseidon, and also we use them in the Pacific legacy products, which you can hear downstairs. What else is nice? So you can use it as a preamp, you can use it as a DAC, you can use it as a DAC with the preamp inputs, because it's nice if you have a turntable, phonostage, reel-to-reel, cassette deck, FM tuner, whatever is your analog source, or a console, or maybe it's a mixing in the table. You can use it with the output of this DAC, and it will be very friendly as a preamp because it has extremely high input impedance and extremely low output impedance. So it does what preamp must do to offer the impedance buffering and conversion from hundreds of kilo ohms to tens of ohms on the output. And that's what makes this kind of preamp makes your associated equipment, being a source and the amp, sound actually better. Because most people think that, well, the preamp cannot make anything sound better. You can only subtract less, you can damage less, or become almost transparent, which goes asymptotically to the transparency of 0, or call it 1.0. But you cannot make better sound. Well, you can, because normal, let's say, tape recorder or phono is designed to work with a 20 kilo load next to it. But when you present it with a half mega load, half mega input impedance, it goes crazy happy, that predecessing component, and it will sound better, it will have a better bass, better low extension, a better high extension, less filtering effect, etc., etc. So by presenting very high input impedance and very low output impedance that works with a crazy low, for example, monoblocks from somebody that use 1 kilo input. Normal tube preamp will die at 1 kilo input, and this one will have no sweat. So the preamp is important, and then when we saw how good the preamp was, we thought, well, maybe somebody doesn't need a DAC, but there is still a market for extremely high-end preamps, and especially the ones that work with solid state, because this is what is popular today: solid state power, tube preamp, and a combination that has the best of both worlds. Hopefully not the worst of both worlds, but the best of both worlds. And that's what I'm using at home, that's what I'm using in my factory, that's what I'm using at my shows. I'm trying to use good solid state preferably simple class A, no feedback and no op-amps, and then the tube source. So this is very good news. And also we decided to sell it without the DAC section, so you save a couple of $1,000s by having just a preamp in case you already have a DAC and you don't want to change it. Also, in the same space that the DAC is inside, so on the top layer we have the preamp, on the bottom layer we have the digital section. It can be replaced with a world-class phono stage that we call the vinyl phono VP4. We can put it inside and it becomes the phono line stage, like they used to be in the good old days. Every preamp had a phono input. Now, then they removed the phono input, making just a line stage, and we are giving back the phono input. Very high quality, no solid state, pure tubes, pure class A, and MC low output cartridge. So it's designed for cartridges of 0.2 and even less. So you cannot have both digital and phono, but if you want the line stage, there it is. If you want line stage with phono, you can have it. You can have a line stage with the DAC. So it's kind of a family. We call it Poseidon. It's a god of the sea because we have marinistic names for all our products: Atlantic, Pacific, Baltic, and you name it. Because I'm a sailor, so I thought that it would go nicely with my life story. So we ran out of oceans. There is nothing bigger than Pacific, and I don't like the two word. Something like, I don't know, Indian Ocean, Arctic Ocean has 2 words, and I needed 1 word, so we went for the god of the seas because it is higher than Pacific, so it would have to be something significant. And also the word sounds good in any language. It's a Greek word, but sounds good in Polish, sounds good in English. So when we will pack it in its final chassis, the housing, it will look like Horizon minus the Nixie display. The Horizon has a Nixie display. This one has this is OLED. This is not LCD. It's OLED display. So OLED gives more information than Nixie, but it's not so cool looking, if you wish.
What's the price?
So the price is 23,000. So we set it at half price of the Horizon. It's 23,000. It's less than the Pacific, our previous flagship, which is now 29, and it's roughly similar to Golden Gate, but it's a much better DAC. It's versus Golden Gate. First of all, it has all this preamp functionality, and it's balanced, and it has a remote control, volume control, and also there is something I forgot to mention, that when you enter at the back with single-ended inputs, then every signal becomes balanced as it goes through the circuitry. And some companies do it by means of using op-amp. It's like an op-amp is doubling the signal and making 2 signals. This is not the way to do it. We don't want to go through the op-amp just to achieve balancing. But most sources are not balanced. Like, turntable is not balanced normally. Tuner is not balanced. Cassette player is not balanced. Reel-to-reel, well, it depends. Usually it's also not balanced. So the only balanced sources are like another DAC with digital engine and output with XLR, but the amplifiers are mostly balanced. So balancing is very important. You can do it by op-amp, or you can do it by a transformer. So you can enter 1 winding and exit through 2 windings, connect them in the opposite way, and you have an output. But the transformer has a 100 ohms input, or 500 ohms, 600 ohms input, and we wanted to have hundreds of kilos. So we could not use the transformer, and the transformers are not so transparent. They damage the signal much more than any capacitor or anything. So finally we came up with a circuit that has 2 inputs, and they should get a negative phase and a positive phase working in the opposite direction. They should. But what happens if you give 1? If you give just 1 signal, the second input is unused, and it is detecting that it doesn't get that signal. So he's working as a mirror of the input. So if there is 0 on the negative phase and the whole signal goes on the positive phase, the negative is responding with creating the negative copy of the first signal. Then if you do both, they are both happy working in the opposite direction, and it doesn't have to happen. So there is no switch nothing to change. Simply, the signal always wants to balance itself. Whether you give it 100% or 50% or 100% or 0%, it will always balance itself, and then everything is balanced and comes out of balance and single-ended at the same time. So every of your sources becomes balanced without the need of spoiling the signal with signal transformer, or op-amp, or special tube that does the balancing by cathode repetition, like a cathode follower. This is much more clever and much more clean, and you don't add any complexity for the normal signal, which is balanced. It doesn't suffer even 1% from the fact that it would balance itself if it wasn't balanced.
You also have XLR inputs?
So XLR inputs, RCA inputs, up to 4 analog inputs, the way you like. And they will always work the same. Even if you used all the RCAs and you didn't order more RCAs and you have XLRs, you can still put an adapter, put an RCA, because when it detects only one phase, it will copy the other phase by itself. So that's very nice, and that's making it a true balanced preamplifier. So your monos are getting XLR on 2 phases.
Good. Is your phono section, is it for one turntable or multiple turntables?
The phono section here had to be squeezed, so we kept the quality for one input and nothing switchable.
Okay.
It's just bare one input, but it's fully maximum quality of the VP4.
Okay.
So if you need 2 turntables or 2 arms or 3 arms or MC, mono cartridge, all the changing of the loads, that has to be a specialized phono switch. But the core is exactly transferred here without changing even one resistor. So you get the $10,000 worth of sound quality inside the car.
Same price? 23.
So 23 is the price with the DAC,
Yeah.
and 23 is the price with the phono. If you will remove and make it a line stage, it's 17. So 6,000 less. But other than that, it's the same, and the requirements will be the same.
For example, if I already have a Lampizator, can I connect the DAC to this one?
Well, if it will become your preamp, yes, and you can also order it without the DAC. Or you can negotiate with a distributor and trade in, and also have a better DAC.
And have one that's watch.
Yes, this engine has, to my knowledge, it has no equal today. As you know, we had COVID, and we had the war, and supply chain interruption, and we had the AKM factory fire, which followed with people buying all remaining stocks of all chips available in the world because the AKM was gone, so they were stocking up, and nobody knew what will happen next. And because nobody in the world produces DAC chips anymore, the stocks from Burr Brown, Texas Instruments, Analog Device, Crystal Semiconductors, their stocks were 10 to 15 years old. And they kept a couple of thousand chips here and there, and that evaporated overnight after the fire. Because it was just a couple of thousand, nobody knew that there would be any need for any chips. And AKM was ruling the world. AKM disappeared in one night, and and never came back. So everything disappeared. And we had to face the situation that we have a supply for maybe 3 years of operation, but then what? So we better come up with something. And that's how we started making this new Engine 11. We found a startup, a company that made the startup chips, and they were looking for new users, and they identify us as an important opinion maker, industry early adopter, and they send us samples, and we absolutely fell from the chair when we listened to this new chip that nobody ever heard of anywhere in the industry. So we started applying it, making software for it, making circuits for it, and now it's a core of our system. Thanks to the big interruption of AKM fire gave an impulse to revolution in chips. But Burr Brown still, if you take their highest model, and Texas Instruments now being Burr Brown, and you take the data sheet, is 2009. The last data sheet of last thing they ever made. They didn't even know that DSD was available back then. So the situation was really dire. And thank God that we found this new startup. That the startup would be completely useless because nobody would even look at them if it wasn't for the fire, and allow us to make brave decisions to try something so new. Because everybody else, like the whole industry, is running on Texas Instruments or Crystal or AKM. So it was an interesting period, 2 years of development. And finally, we got this very musical and very analog sound, very organic, liquid, without any trace of digital type of sound. And I'm very happy with it. I wish we could give it all the way down to the Amber, which is our entry level. But besides Amber, every DAC already has the Engine 11. Only this one has a more sophisticated application, so more regulators, more voltages, more filtering, more good capacitors and everything. So it's an expensive way of applying the chip, but it's still the same core, the same heart. So here it is. I don't think this room is any place to evaluate a high-end system. There are no treatments, the walls are very live because Deepak doesn't use this place for listening. This is for living with his family. Downstairs is a proper listening room, but then only 4 people fit there at the time. So we decided to put it here, and it sounds like a live, untreated room, of course.
What's the box on the bottom?
So in the bottom, it's a power filter. We started making these filters before even any DACs, about 20 years ago. Filtering RFI, the radio frequencies from the mains and from the ground. And first it was a 1-channel, and then it was a 4-channel called Silk. And then I thought, okay, now the systems are growing. Generally, people have separates. They have DAC, transport, streamer, turntable, phono, preamp, monos. And before you know it, it's like 8 inputs. Yeah. So we made 10 inputs. And I look at the back and I said, it looks like a power plant. So maybe we could call it Kraftwerk, because it's in German, it's the power plant. And it's a band, Kraftwerk. So I thought it's a musical word, but also it means a power plant, like electrical power plant. So we call it Kraftwerk-10 because it has 10 inputs. And also we have a guy in the company who said that he knows how to make DC blocker, because a lot of main systems in our houses have DC component, and they are terrible for high-end equipment, like really terrible. And I could go on and on for hours how bad DC is, but we don't notice it because it's like it doesn't hurt. There is no pain. You don't know it exists, but it diminishes the quality of your sound by a lot. So we made a DC blocker for these outputs, individual filtering lines, and also thunder and lightning protection, and commutation or over voltage spike protection, which is quite tight. So it will be different for America. So we don't use just like 300 volts that we use in Europe, a little bit above the 230. We use 140 volts. So we are a little bit above the American voltage. So we are really taking care of any spike coming in, will be immediately grounded. And if there is a thunder, of course, nothing can save you from real lightning close by. But maybe this equipment will be repairable at least. Maybe it will be damaged, but repairable, but it will not be just a pile of ash. So you have 3 functions, the filtering, DC blocking, and lightning protection. And lighting protection, of course, doesn't affect the sound, but the rest of it affects the sound so much that after launch 3 months ago, I think, we sold about 30 pieces and nobody returned them. People loan them, listen, and they say, oh, okay, it's not coming back. So there is something good happening, I must say.
The cost is?
The cost is 4,000 euros. So here is 10% more. It's called Kraftwerk, has 10 outputs, up to 4,000 watts of power collectively. And it has an ampere meter, voltmeter, so you know what is happening in your system. You know how much your monoblocks draw and so on.
Do you make a smaller one too?
Sorry?
Do you make a smaller one?
No, we just went from smaller to this big one.
Okay, that's
Economically,
One
it's
size
completely
fits
stupid
all,
to make a
okay.
smaller one. So I would rather have you 5 unused outputs and keep the price relatively
Got it.
low. Because sooner or later you will find use for those things. Whether it's a switch, whether it's a router, whether it's another reclocker or another source, you will always find a use for a good, clean power output.
One question, I mean, a lot of people says that those power supplies or whatever,
Yes.
different names, different brands has, they change a little bit the sound. Is that everyone has a particular sound? Is
Yes,
that good?
so I'm obsessed with the fact that these things from other people, they choke the energy. So I used to borrow or buy from other manufacturers these filters, put the filter, you plug your music and say, wow, it's so nice and so clean. And 10 minutes later you think, well, but it has no bolts. There's no energy. It's something too polite. It's like an old 20-year-old horse. It will not jump. And then you go back to the wall and go, wow, yeah, I prefer the wall. That's what triggered me. Could I apply my knowledge to do something that doesn't have that effect? Well, that was my original plan, to try to create something that doesn't choke the music. So the whole impedance of this versus the coming from the wall is like 0.1 ohm. So it has an equivalent of 4 inches of copper wire. It is non-existent impedance to change the impulse electricity coming even to huge boulder monorocks. But then we analyzed what is bothering really your equipment from the mains. Why would you want to change it? And my conclusion was that it's the high frequency that we don't hear. It's not in a 20 kilohertz, it's not 5 kilohertz, it's not something that you can hear. It is mega and gigahertz coming from GSM, radio, military, radars, taxis, and police. And obviously you can't hear them, and you can't see them on oscilloscope, but they enter through these cables, and let's say they go to the clock and mess up the clock, so it has to work harder or make small jitter mistakes. So by removing the gigahertz information, I don't affect the sign. The sign is as it is. And I don't care to repair it. People say, oh, it's going to be perfect sign. I don't care about perfect sign, because what it does is a sign going through my mains, and the first thing it sees is a diode and becomes flat. So I'm taking flat energy and loading it to capacitors. I don't care if the coming thing was a sine or a triangle or a square, even if it was a Inca writing. It could be any shape or form, as long as it brings energy through the diode, becomes flat, rectified. So I don't care about sine. But if I have megahertz radio coming in and running around all my grounds and chips, this is what I care about. So I'm shaving with a very small blade, very small hair somewhere in the megahertz. And don't touch the sine wave, and don't try to like recreate it from battery pack and from UPS. Don't recreate anything. The mains is good as it is from the nuclear power plant. All I need is to have no RFI inside, radio frequency interference. So this is what the Kraftwerk is doing. And I hear something in the magnitude of a very major cable change. So it becomes more liquid. I could count people in the band. I see where they stand. I hear them playing together. Without the filter, they are just like a bunch, a mess. They are there, but I don't know where. So this is what I hear, and people like it. So I'm not going to tell you exactly that this filter does. It's not like it does this, and this, but it does something. And also organize my cable, and also protects my equipment, and also removes the DC. And the DC causes all kinds of trouble: humming, buzzing, transformer problems, losing power, and so on and so on.
What about isolating transformer?
I don't need it. Why? The transformer is inside. It isolates the mains from the circuit. Why should I put a transformer after transformer? It's like, I don't know. I can't even give a comparison. It would be a red flag for my original transponder that is wrong, or my internal filters that they are wrong. Because you need to isolate something from something. No, doesn't make sense in my book. Maybe somebody will use it and will like it, okay. But it's another product, and I'm not talking about that product. Some people like it, and usually they buzz and hum, and they're big and heavy and dangerous, and you don't really need them. Otherwise, why not 3? We could 4 if they improve something, one after another. So I don't know. The world of this equipment is a huge world and full of undiscovered islands, and we will probably have many years of discovering items like cones and spikes and cables and filters and whatever. So thank you for attention. I was talking too long, but I get very excited about my products.
Thank you.
And,
Thank you, Lucas.